Lee Zimmerman. Mr. Zimmerman was born in Eudora and graduated from Eudora High School in 1943. And, I guess this shut off for some reason, but earlier we had a picture, there it is, that I found in the 1942 Eudora High School Cardinal Yearbook of Mr. Zimmerman there. And as you can tell, he was class president, junior class president, and there's a football picture of him there as well. So I kind of need to find those old pictures. And there were several others in there, but those are the only ones I included up there. But after high school, Mr. Zimmerman was a merchant marine during World War II and the Korean War. He was also involved in the Zimmerman Steel Company in Lawrence. And just the other day, one of our members found this passage in the Lawrence Daily Journal World from February 23rd, 1944, and I'd like to read it to you. Mr. and Mrs. William Zimmerman of Eudora received a letter from Harold Lee on Monday evening saying he arrived safely in Australia. He said the climate is very hot and he has gained 18 pounds and the food is wonderful. Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman reported it was 7 weeks before they received the letter and he is in the Navy. So, just kind of a little passage there that I thought was kind of interesting, kind of a window into the past there and Mr. Zimmerman's past there. That's really all I have, so I know we're really happy to have him here, and everyone please welcome Mr. Harold Lee Zimmerman.
Thank you all so much for having me back. It's good to be back in Eudora. I would kind of start by saying, don't expect to learn one thing from me tonight about the history of Eudora. That won't be the substance of the remarks that I have to say. Contrary, I will try to make a few remarks and tell you a little about the Eudora that I grew up in from 1924 until 1943. That was the year I was born. It was the year that I left Eudora, right after I finished my senior year of high school here. And I went from here down to Wichita for a very few months, and then the war was getting really cranked up, and I would have been drafted that fall of '43, but I went ahead and joined the Merchant Marine and spent about really the next 6 years out at sea. I was on many cargo ships. Was never in the Navy. I was always on merchant ships, and was on cargo and tankers, and was all over the world. I've been around the world. I've been around the world twice before I ever saw the Grand Canyon. That was the nature of the Merchant Marine, wherever the cargo was needed, and that was all over the world in those years. And that's where we would usually sail out of Los Angeles or San Francisco. And that's pretty much all I really would rather say about myself, only myself as it relates to growing up in Lawrence. First of all, I made a couple notes here. The Eudora, as I grew up, composed of, in a north-south direction, it started at 6th Street, like pretty much where we are, just one block north of here, and extended out to 12th Street. There was nothing beyond 12th Street. Going out 12th Street on Church Street, there was a Figgenbaum home there at 12th. That would be on the southwest, a large nice two-story home on the southwest corner of 12th and Church. And then on both sides of Church Street, will be clear on out to where 10 Highway is now, was wheat fields every year on each side. And as probably my freshman, senior year of high school would have found me out there driving a truck, hauling wheat, or then later on, because every year, the first few years I can recall, that was all wheat that was shocked, and then they would bring a separator in, and we have a huge straw stack on the right-hand side of Church Street, about halfway out beyond 12th Street. Then the combines, and I remember I would drive a tractor to pull a combine, and we would cut the weed out there. So that was what happened on the south side of Eudora. In those, there was no residences beyond that point, other than farm homes, of course, going clear on south. Gosh, I was very young when go on south there, what is it, 5 miles to that Sinclair corner, or the Sinclair pumping station, when they built the pumping station there, and I think either 4 or 5 small red bungalows to house their people that were working there just to the north. That was quite an event. It created quite a bit of conversation here in town when that installation went in. Trying to think back how we spent our summers and winters growing up in Eudora. This was during the 30s mainly. Everyone was working. That I remember. Everybody worked. The young kids, from the time you were old enough to do a meaningful chore, you had one to do. There was plenty of work to be done. What there wasn't very much of was money. Very little money. What little salary jobs there were was, by today's standards, just very low salaries. And it didn't take a lot of money, because with everyone working, everyone contributing to the family income and the family subsistence, it just all worked out for everyone. And then the big thing here with the kids in town, the kids on the farms, of course, they were working for their parents, and pretty much during the summer months away from school were working, helping their parents on the farms. But we kids in town, there was a lot of potatoes grown in this area in those years, both in Weaver Bottom and in the Call Bottom between Lawrence and Eudora. And most of us were working the potato fields. I don't know, I wasn't very old when I first went to the potato field, and that was an experience. We looked forward to it for the first few days anyway. Then it maybe become the short, but it was kind of a ritual. It started every day, and the Nice brothers were the big farmers in the Weaver Bottom, and a lot of us went down there. And the ritual was every morning, right around 6 o'clock, they would send their farm trucks up to the Methodist church with just a flat bed on them that they were used to haul the sacks of potatoes on. And the kids would get up on their truck, whichever one of there was Carl and Ben and Keith. Those are the names I remember. They would all have, and whether you were, which one of those you were working for, and then go to the bottom and pick up potatoes all day long. And then in the evening, I think it was usually probably, that started from about 6 to 6, pretty much 12-hour day probably. And a lot of the kids that lived here in town, the city families, the kids would be out in those potato fields. I know I was, and I was for quite a few years. Till I got a little older, about high school age, then it was usually in the wheat fields, either driving a truck hauling wheat into town or driving the tractor pulling the combine. My parents, we lived in the 700 block between Main and, is it Elm, the first street to the east? Midway between 7th and 8th. And my dad was a blacksmith here in town. He had a shop just right next door almost. Here there was a floor hardware between this building. This building at that time consisted of a small wood frame building. It had a basement. They kept the fire engine down there. I can remember well, the fire engine very seldom started. Big problem was a volunteer fireman, whether there'd be a fire, the volunteer fireman would come, but they couldn't get the old Model T truck started. So it was more of a bucket brigade than anything else. But anyway, my dad had that shop there. He was a blacksmith in Eudora for 40 years until he retired, and then the family moved to Lawrence. I was in the service at that time. But I never really spent a lot of time around. I would hang out there to shop, but I never learned the blacksmith trade. It didn't seem like anything I wanted to do I guess. So I didn't spend a lot of time there with Dad in the shop. And you think after that, between my junior and senior year, high school. Sunflower Ordnance Works, that would have been in 1942. Sunflower Ordnance Works was just getting started. Everything was a beehive full of construction. And even though I was only 17 years old, I did get a union job out there driving a truck. I'd driven enough farm trucks that I knew a little bit about driving trucks, so I took a job out there that summer between junior and senior year in school and drove a truck. And my job there was mainly hauling lumber. They were hauling just an abundance of lumber from the DeSoto sidings there, out there, to build those two big administration buildings there right on the highway, and then lots of stuff back in the plant area. So I worked out there during that summer, and then when school started, I was back here in school. So that was kind of typical, I suppose, for most of the kids that lived here in town. They did pretty much the same thing, different jobs, everything, but along those very same lines. Wintertime, lots of sledding and lots of ice skating. Our ice skating rink consisted of the Wakarusa for the main part between Old 10, which is where right here, 10th Street, the overhead bridge there at 10th Street, on south out to, well, at that time, the Duellen Bridge. It was right there at the Gage Ranch where it crossed. And let's see, there was a Blue Jacket Ford. Yeah, that's another name that was there. I believe there's a winery out in that location now. But we skated the Wakarusa between 10 Highway and out there. And there was a lot of the town kids and a few of the country kids would come in, and we'd go out and build bonfires along the creek. We spent a lot of time ice skating out there when it was cold enough that we had good ice. There was a Zimmerman family that lived here in south west Eudora. They had 2 ponds there on there. We used to skate on those ponds a lot. And once again, a lot of the high school kids would be out there in the evening and build a big fire. We would get used tires from the filling stations that had, and take those out and build a big fire, and then go home just about as black as you could get. Tire smoke, and that, I can remember that so well. We did a lot of sledding. Did our sledding on Church Street, just north of 6th. If you know that area, there's a steep hill that goes right down towards the railroad track. And it was a great place to sled, because you could get a lot of speed going down that hill. There was only one trick. When you got to the bottom, you had to make a turn. If you didn't make a turn, you went right ahead into a big ditch, which was not a comfortable thing to do. But we got so everybody could pretty much make that turn, and there was an elevator there at that time, and we'd turn into that elevator and the scales there, and go back and do it again. So that was kind of the wintertime activities. And I mentioned to Doris earlier this evening, we spent a lot of time in my junior and senior year right across the street here at the USO Club. This would have been in 41, 42. The USO National Organization sent a lady in here, Miss Moe, who had experience and training in setting up these USO recreation clubs. And she came to Eudora and organized that with help from the local people, and they had that club up there, and it was open pretty much 7 days a week, especially in the evening hours, and there was just a lot of good entertainment there for the school-age kids. We would go up there, and she taught us to box. She had boxing gloves and lots of things like that. Played a lot of cards and various games. She was, had been born and raised, I think, on the East Coast, and she brought card games and things like that to Eudora that we had never seen before. So that was part of our wintertime activities. Within the city, I can recall first, in those days, I might tell you, our streets, we had no hard surface streets. All of the streets in Eudora were sand. They would, the single maintenance man for the whole city would take his team and a wagon and haul sand right up and down the street. He would go down to the river and with a shovel, load a load of sand and bring it up the hill and spread it around the streets. And that, all of, even the main street was sand. Then in about, I would say probably 1937 and 38, crushed rock became quite an item. There had not been any crushed rock streets or roads prior to that. But someone developed the rock crusher, and then that kind of set out. The city council of Eudora were able to locate a used rock crusher somewhere in the area and bought it and brought it out and set it up in a rock cliff here on 7th Street, just before you start up the hill to the cemetery on the right-hand side. There's a bluff there, and there was a ledge of rock through there. And they set that crusher up out there and started crushing rock, and that was Eudora's first crushed rock street sand in place, which was an improvement over the sand. I say an improvement. I can remember I rode a bicycle, I think, for years, and it wasn't quite as good to ride a bicycle with that crushed rock as it was the sand streets. But that's what we had. And I remember one affair that happened, and maybe it was only for one summer, but the city council, I think, were trying to find different things that the kids would have to do to occupy their time. So on a Saturday afternoon, they set up some activities. I've kind of forgotten just what they were, right in the middle of Main Street here between 7th and 8th. They're on the hill. And one of the things they did that I'll always remember, stands out in my mind, I've thought about it many times since, a gentleman named Carl Lutz. His home was right across the street here on the corner, and he owned the department store. He had a dry goods material on one side. The other side was a small grocery and meat market, and he would donate sacks of flowers that had got weevils in them. I think that was the reason he couldn't sell. They weren't sellable, so he would donate those. They would take those, a couple sacks of that flour, out in the middle of the street, dump it out, and mix a roll of 100 pennies, you know, as they dumped it. And what a game for the kids for about an hour, digging through that flour and dig those pennies out. But it was a great affair. The kids looked forward to it, and they would have that maybe, I suppose, 4 or 5 times during the summer weeks and months while the kids were out of school. And that was one of Eudora's activities that they all look forward to. Then, of course, later in the summer was a CPA picnic. That was a great thing. It was always a 2-day affair. The first day, particularly, there on this, well, let's see, that would have been between 9th and 10th Street, going up the hill to the highway. They would have the races set up there, sack races and greased pig contest, trying to catch a greased pig. I can well remember. I say I can well remember. I'm trying to draw my memory, but I had kind of a personal connection to that greased pig contest. I think after the contest was over, they sold the pigs, $2 or $3 for the pig. My brother and I owned a bicycle together, but in the meantime, Dad, I think, had bought us to share a new bicycle, so we had this old bicycle. But in short, I sold the bicycle, my half of the bicycle. I sold all the bicycle. so that I would have some money to buy a pig. So I bought the pig, and Dad had a chicken pen, and he always had chickens there. So I thought, well, no reason the pig can't live with chickens, so I'll take the pig. So I did this. This was something I did on my own, grade school age, and the pig died. And that wasn't all that bad, except my brother could not understand what happened to his half of the bicycle. I bought the pig with it, but the pig died. So that was the type of thing that I had to live with, I guess. Remember back, not only did we have sand streets, we had no sewer system in Eudora in those years. There was outhouses, every house in town had to have an outhouse. We had no water system in Eudora in those early years of the 30s. Because both the sewer system and the water system, and some of you, if there is, I doubt if there lived in Eudora at that time, but if there was, I think it was in the late 30s that both the sewer system and the water system were built in Eudora. And that was, of course, a huge improvement. And I don't know what Eudora would have done just a very few years later during the war years had not been that those kind of improvements had been made ahead of time. So we had sand streets, we had no sewer, and we had no water. But we got by. We got by. And it was a peaceful time compared to today, the happenings around the world. But everyone worked, they worked hard, and seemed to get by in just pretty good shape. Pretty good shape. I just don't think poverty existed in Eudora. I don't think if there was anyone that was in need of a little bit of help, they got it, the churches and so forth. We had good churches, good church congregations, and that was a strong part of the small town, I think. I can go on that kind of thing probably half the night, but I think maybe I'll hold up. If there's any questions or any of you are wondering about any of that, I would certainly try to answer.
Was it the WPA that put in the water and sewer system? Works Progress
No,
Administration?
I don't believe the WPA did that. No, there were some government programs. My dad had been on the city council for many years, and I have a little recollection of how some of that came about through the fact that he would go to the council meetings. And so, but I think there was some government, that was kind of the Roosevelt administration.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, Roosevelt, let's see, he first went into office in '33, and he had quite a few programs, and like the city council could apply to the government for money, low interest money to, and I believe that's how that came, the sewer system and the water system come about. The WPA was quite active in those days. And let's see, was it the WPA that built Lone Star Lake? That's when I remember the big, because they even built barracks out there first. And fellows that were in the program lived out there while they were working and building Lone Star Lake about in those years of the 30s. And that was an entire WPA project.
Did you have individual wells or cisterns for water supply?
Had wells, dug wells. Okay, at home down there we had both a well and a cistern. And I can remember with Dad's shop being right here next door of coming down here as a kid and watch. They drilled a city well right out. Well, this building would set right over today. And they built a city well and brought a drilling rig in and drilled and hit good water. And then anyone could come and get water from that well or fill a tank from it. But it was a pump. There was no power equipment, no switch to pull. You pull the handle. But Usually all the households had a well. And maybe a well and a cistern. Yes, Doris?
How did your football season end
Our football season,
when you were in high school?
not well. I think
Sorry to ask.
I think maybe we won one or two games. I can remember one game, maybe I remember for some reason, better than any. We won over played Spring Hill. And we had a little 5 conference. That was Wellsville and Eudora, Baldwin, Gardner. No, DeSoto was never in our league. We played DeSoto in basketball, never did play. In fact, DeSoto did not have a football team. They had, what did they play, 6-man or 8-man football down there, but they never had a full 11-man football team in those years. But they did play good basketball.
You didn't mention the band,
The what?
the Salvation Army band.
Oh, thank you, thank you. This was one of the other Saturday, I was telling Doris about this the other day. We got on something and I asked her if she remembered, but it was before her time. On Saturday evenings, the Main Street, a lot of the farm families would come come into town on a Saturday, late Saturday afternoon, early evening, do their grocery shopping probably, or what other shopping they might do. Then there was some activity right on Main Street. One of the things was the Salvation Army Band from Lawrence would come down. And they would set up and they would play right there on midway between 7th and 8th, there on Main Street. And that was quite an activity. And then there was a family here, the Logans, and Jimmy Logan would set up his little shoe shine thing there. And I can't remember many people or many of the fellows having their shoes shine, but there was always shoes sitting there. They would bring them in and have him polish them while they were doing other things, I guess. And he would polish his. I remember him working there with several pairs of shoes sitting on the ground or around him. So that was an activity. Just what else went on, I don't quite remember. But Saturday night was quite active on Main Street of Eudora for that reason.
I have a question. Well,
Okay.
actually two, because I know nothing about these families. The Ludholtzes?
The Littles, sure.
Yeah, and the Vanakins. I
Okay.
think the Vanakins lived in that, I guess you'd call it a mansion?
Yes, you
on
would.
Old 10 on the.
On Old 10 Highway.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. Old 10 Highway that built, just as you went up County Line Hill on the south side. Uh-huh, yeah. Mhm. He was an architect from Kansas City.
oh,
And of course, later his son then was also an architect and lived out there.
I'm just so
And you mentioned the Ludholtzes,
yes.
the George Ludholtz family. George lived in a very nice home right across the street here.
Oh,
And
really?
he owned the bank.
Ah.
George was the banker. He never was there a lot. Bill Mercer kind of ran the bank for George Ludholtz.
So did Ludholtz, did he end up building a house out in the country?
They had a home, his son, trying to think of his first name, Bob Ludholtz
Yeah.
was the grandson of George Ludholtz, and he lived out there in more recent years. Yeah, he would still be considerably older.
His daughter lives there now.
I was
Is that right?
curious, they were on my bus route.
Oscar Russell.
Oscar, yeah, uh-huh. Oscar
Good,
Ludholtz.
I wanted to-
Bob there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
The Ludholtzes lived out there. But George lived right across the street.
And that house is known for its pocket doors.
For his pocket doors, is that right? Didn't know they had pocket doors in those days, Doris.
There's 2 in my house.
Really? Is that right?
3.
I put a couple or 3 pocket doors in the steel company, there's a steel company. They just seemed to work out, didn't have any place to hinge a door, so we put a pocket door in. I remember.
It saves room in your room.
They did.
Take up all
They
the
did.
space.
In a way, they were a little unhandy, but you get used to them. Yes,
Were there any colored here at your time?
yes. I think there was either 3 or 4 colored families there were colored boys in high school on the football team, played football. The football teams for Eudora High in those years were pretty much consisted of just the families that lived here in Lawrence. The farm boys were, they just didn't have the time when school was out, they had to go home and do chores. They didn't have time to practice. So there were very few of the farm boys were on, there were a few, but very few, because the rest of them, I can remember, would have really liked to have played football, but they had chores to do at home, so they didn't have time to practice football or basketball.
During the war, did your family have a victory garden?
I was gone so much, it's a little, yes, I think they, my dad always had a big garden. So I'm sure they would have had a victory garden during those. Yes,
I'm kind of interested when you were in high school, since Eudora had so many families of German descent. During World War II, you know, you were, you volunteered for the Merchant Marine, and I'm sure others went, you know, into the other services.
absolutely.
What was there any rancor in the high school, or, you know, any teasing about, you know, someone having a German last name, or was it just everyone was accepted that they were Americans?
If there, it was, I understand your question real well. And I think one of the reasons, I think I had a certain amount of animosity within myself about that very same thing. And whether others did, I suppose, to a degree, whatever degree. And I was a German, from a German family, but still I had a certain animosity to German or anything German, a German word or anything. But I kept it within myself, and it was not strong. It just was a slight thing that existed. But no, I think, to answer your question, I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all. But it was a German settlement. My mother's, Richard knows this probably better than I, but my mother's family all came from Wisconsin. They were all up there, then they migrated down to Kansas. My father's family all came pretty much direct from Heidelberg, Germany, to Leavenworth, and then the dad was in well, there was 4 boys in his family, and his parents both died in their early 30s. And the 4 boys were in an orphanage up there, and they kind of spread out in this area. Dad was taken in by a family gardener, and he was over there, worked on the farm. And then somehow got to Kansas City, Kansas, and learned the blacksmith trade, and came to Eudora. I don't know that I ever really knew that story that well, but that was basically how our family ended up in Eudora. Yes, sir.
What would you win if you caught a greased pig? Is there any kind of prize, or what was the purpose?
There was a cash prize.
Okay.
There was a cash prize.
Okay.
But you had to be pretty good to catch a greased pig.
I bet.
Pig usually won those contests. believe me. Yes, sir.
Did you grow up with any haters or models, go to school with them?
Yeah, the Hadels certainly, and the Models was a family name that I was well aware of. I can't remember of there being any of them in school when I was. Yes. Yeah, there were quite a few Hadel families around. And there's several about my age in school at that time. Yes, sir.
Do you know the family name in the Gardner area that your father was with?
Yes, I do. Harrington.
That was my mother's parents.
Is that right? The Harringtons, I can remember well, they had taken Dad in right out of the orphanage, and he lived with them there and helped them on the farm. And then later on, they were elderly and they moved into Gardner. The farm was out right where the air base was built.
Still, well, the family farm was out where the Catholic cemetery was, just a half mile
I
from
see.
the Catholic cemetery, which is on that same Moonlight Road, which was the main entry onto the Naval Air Station.
Do you remember residents on 56 Highway in town? Where
Yeah,
they-
there's a third house, west of Center Street. and
You got
Main
it.
Street.
We would go over there quite often, every year, maybe 2 or 3 times, usually during the winter months, on a Sunday afternoon, and Dad wanted to visit with the Harringtons.
The Keys and Harringtons were my grandmother's parents.
I see.
Or-
Oh, yeah, connections. Richard, what all did I say wrong?
Sounded good to me.
Did you remember part of all of that? You were living in Lawrence at the time.
Oh, yeah, I was in Lawrence then, but I still remember a lot of that stuff. 'Cause I used to come down here all the time.
Sure you
at
did.
Grandma's,
Sure.
and, I don't know if a lot of these people know this, I don't even know if you know it or not, but, you know, your mother was my dad's sister,
That's right.
and, she was a Ziesness.
Yes.
Well, I had a great uncle, August Ziesness.
Mhm.
He built the first house in Eudora.
Really?
Yeah, I
I
didn't know
was
if
not,
you knew that.
I was not, no, I wasn't aware of that at all.
Yeah, he was quite all kind of a big shot around Douglas County and even the state of Kansas.
I can remember August Ziesness, but
Yeah.
I really never placed
He
it.
was like a great uncle, probably to you and me,
I see. Yeah.
on the Ziesness side.
That was a large family, the Ziesnesses, I think
Yeah.
8 or 9 of them total.
Well,
And your
there's 9
dad
that lived, but there were 12 altogether.
was there? Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
my-
there
my
were some
grandfather
deaths
had 12
earlier.
kids, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And,
Your dad was the youngest. and
Yeah,
I
Dad
think
was the
my
youngest.
mother was the youngest girl.
yeah. And August Ziesnes is buried in the public cemetery.
Was that right?
Yeah.
I see. Yes.
Lee, did you, know Albert von Gutten?
Oh, I certainly did.
And do you remember most of the houses in Eudora he might have built?
He built and at least did a lot of cabinet work and finish type part, carpentry work, yes. Uh-huh, yeah.
Built
Al
our house.
Al Van Gutten. His son, remember his name?
No, I don't remember.
He lived next door to my parents when my parents
Oh,
moved
sure, sure, in Lawrence on
in Lawrence,
Barker.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
on Barker Street.
On Barker, right
First
across the street from Clem and Edna Zillmer. Edna's picture, 106 years old, is still in mind just sharp as a tack. Yeah. Still alive.
Well, he built the Fall Leaf School and it's.
Oh, is that right?
And our home, and also St. Paul, Evan.
There was something I made a note of and then forgot to mention, the cities around Eudora. And I'll use the term loosely when I say city, but there was Hesper, there was a few of us knew where Hesper was. And then one that I never hear anymore, maybe some of you will recognize the name, Bellevue. Bellevue was south and just a little to the west, I believe, of Church Street extended here.
Chef Stalls lived there, if I.
What's
remember.
that?
Chef Stalls lived at Bellevue.
How about Fall Leaf?
Fall Eve, absolutely. Prairie Center, metropolis of Prairie Center, right in the middle of Sunflower this way.
Yeah, I lived in a house that was like, good grief, right here, Pony Express, and the train would come and deliver mail there and such. I lived in that house for a while.
Is that right?
It was made into a house, yeah, a school right across our drive. That's pretty neat though. Yeah, I was
Would be.
a cool guy that lived in that house. I just loved the street, it was neat going in there with the school. Fall Leaf is the area. Yeah.
In those years, the years that I've covered, do any of you know where our first theater was?
Right across the street.
In Eudora, right next door. Right
My
next.
mother's best friend and her husband built it.
Oh,
Oh, is that right?
Her name was Nadine and I was named after my middle name.
I see. Yeah, that was the first movie theater
called the Victory.
Victory Theater.
Victory?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh, yeah.
It was put in, when Hercules was going real good.
Oh, yeah, that's why it came, that's what brought it about.
There
Yeah.
were thousands of people around here.
Of course, yeah, this is another thing that I failed to mention, I shouldn't, because it was such a big part of my years in Eudora. And that was when, in 1941, that's when it first started, and they went out there and they announced that they would be building Sunflower Ordnance Works out there. Eudora just changed overnight. Start with the population doubled within, what, 6 months? How much more than that? Every spare room and house that was empty was full, and most of the yards had at least 1 or 2 motor homes in them.
They were living in tents too.
And living even in tents. Yeah, yeah, there were tents. It was just packed, and so much so that a lot of them then had to go to Lawrence to live and commute the extra mileage. And it had a big influence on Eudora and what happened in Eudora. Yes.
Before the Victory Theater, when I was a kid, this old park across the street during the summer months. Anybody old enough to remember this? Jim Harris, do you remember? They used to show outdoor movies.
I was a country kid, I didn't come to town.
He's not old enough.
I remember the very first movies that I'd seen in Eudora, and I believe the Eudora City Council did it, but at the old frame building that stood right here, they would put a screen, a white, probably a sheet, a couple sheets on the north side of it, and they're just sit on the ground out there in front, and they would show a movie. And the film would break 3 or 4 times. Everything is so dark. Unless there's any other questions, I think that pretty much covers what I did in Eudora and how I grew up in Eudora. Like I said, I left here then and graduated in '43 and graduated on, I think, on a Friday evening. And Sunday went to Wichita and worked down there for 3 months at Boeing, and then I went into the service and was pretty much in then, well, I was in, that was in '43. And then I was in until '46 and came home and went to KU for 2 years and then called back in. I was in, my commission was in the Naval Reserve, and I was called back in, and it was back on merchant ships during the Korean War. And I was out, then I stayed there until '51 when I went to school out of Berkeley and finished up out there. Those were good years, interesting years, a lot of war activity in the South Pacific. I made 1 or 2 trips off the East Coast or into Europe, but practically all of my time was in the South Pacific. Yes.
Can you tell us about Zimmerman Steel in Lawrence?
Okay, yeah. When I came back here then, first, Dad had the shop here. And Mother wanted to move to Lawrence. Dad didn't. Mother wanted to move to, she had 2 sisters up there, and a brother, and Richard's dad family, Dad. And she wanted to move to Lawrence, so Dad agreed that he would sell out here, and they went up on Barker Avenue and bought a home right across from, or right next door to the Van Guttons, who were related, and also Clem and Edna Zimmerman. And Dad was restless. He had nothing to do. Worked all his life. Didn't know anything except work. And there was a little shop right there on 18th and Massachusetts Street. A fella had a little farm supply store. We really wouldn't call it the hardware. It was more farm supplies. And a little blacksmith shop in the back. And he wanted to retire. And Dad knew that this would have been 45, I guess, yes, 45. It was obvious the war wasn't going to last too much longer. We were going in France, I guess, and was kind of moving on through. The war wasn't going to last. And Dad knew that my brother and I, Bob is 2 years older than I am, would be getting out of service, and we would need something to do. Not next week or next month, but the next day. If we got here, then we want to be doing something, standing or So he, it just so happened that Bob and I both happened to be on home on leave at the same time. And Dad said, let's go over and talk to Don Baker and see whether we can buy that. And that's what happened, and we bought that. Well, Dad bought that. Then it was not long after that that I had to go back to the Korean War. And I did, and I was in this out on the coast then for about a little over two years, and I was in school out there. And I had kind of decided probably I would stay in California. But my brother was pushing me real hard. The store was doing well, and he wanted to expand it. So he wanted me to come back. So I decided, okay, I'll move back to Kansas. So I did that, and then I came back. Then I was there with him in, we built a new larger store, and I was there with him for about 3 or 4 years. I was mainly interested in the shop part of it, the steel work. So we went out on East 19th Street there, just 3 blocks east of Master, and built the Zimmerman Steel Company shop, and I was there 53 years. We did a lot of structural steel. We did steel for all the steel for Fraser Hall at KU, and probably the biggest job we ever did was the Hallmark complex, the whole warehouse, that building out all the structural steel for it. So we had a good run. It was always good because the university had a continuing building program all the time. They had new buildings coming out and fabricating beams, support beams and columns, steel stairways, handrails, that type of thing. We would bring the steel in just stock lengths, either 20 or 40 foot from the rolling mills in the Chicago area. On rail, we had a rail siding right there and brought most of it in on rail in those days, later on trucks. Then we would cut it up and bend it and weld it, put a coat of prime paint on it, and take it to the jobs. So that was a good work. It went well for us. We were there 53 and just sold out last Christmas time. Okay, thank you again for the opportunity to come down and see you all. Doris asked me to mention, you mentioned Madame Arkle. I can remember so well just as a kid, right just a couple blocks west of Maine here on 10 Highway on the south side.
Yeah.
Right there by where the ravine goes through there. But the thing that I remember so much, it was not really, she was, and her fortune telling was not really an item at all, it seemed to me, for the Eudora people. But there would always be a car or two over the weekend, Saturday, and especially on a Sunday afternoon, with a Missouri license plate on it, or Lawrence, out of town license plate on it, where people would coming in.
Yeah.
And had their foot.
Yeah, we found her.
She was well known.
We found her obituary. She was widowed for 30 years, so that's probably how she
Made a living, I'm
Yeah,
sure,
Yeah.
subsisted for herself, sure.
That house is still down there, and they're reconditioning it right now. They're making it like new.
Where is it?
10th and Fur.